Tonight, freedom. Vladimir Kara-Murza, one of Putin's fiercest and bravest critics, speaking out for the first time here in the U.S. with his family after being freed in the biggest prisoner exchange since the Cold War. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for treason because he dared to speak out against the Russian president's war in Ukraine, spending more than 2 years of his sentence, nearly a year of it spent in solitary confinement inside one of Russia's most brutal penal colonies. And tonight, for the first time on U.S. television, he joins me along with his wife, Evgenia, in their first joint U.S. interview since he was released just 11 days ago. Kara-Murza is 42 years old. They have 3 children. His wife, Evgenia, fought tirelessly for his release. As many of you may remember from this program, she tirelessly appeared to fight for her husband. And out front now, the former Russian political prisoner, Vladimir Kara-Murza, and Evgenia Kara-Murza. And thanks to both of you. As I said, it's like an apparition to even see you. Vladimir, you thought you were going to die.
Well, Erin, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really good to be on your show, and I really mean this.
Yes, but you talked about that you thought that you were never going to see them again. You thought you were going to die in prison, and yet here you are together. Have you even been able to process that you are here with her and your children?
No, frankly, I think it's a little bit too much and too quick for a human mind to process. I mean, just a little over 2 weeks ago, I was still sitting in my solitary confinement cell in a harsh regime prison colony in Siberia, and I was certain that I was going to end my life in Putin's prison. And here I am now sitting with you in a studio in New York next to my wife. And, Vladimir Bukovsky, who's a very prominent prisoner of conscience in the Soviet Union, who was himself exchanged famously in 1976. That exchange was also mediated by the U.S. administration. He compared the experience of a political prisoner being so suddenly and so unexpectedly released to what a deep-sea diver must feel when he's suddenly taken, from the depth to the surface. You just completely lose orientation in space, in time. And so for these past 2 weeks, frankly, it felt as if I'm watching some sort of a film. I mean, it's a really good film, but it still feels completely surreal.
You know, it's things that it's hard for any of us to even kind of understand or to process about you. For example, you weren't talking. You were in solitary confinement. And now you're sitting here having conversations. You're actually hearing your own voice. Things like that are things that you had forgotten. So I'm curious, Evgenia, in these 2 years that you and I have spoken, you always had this calm presence, this fortitude and this strength, and it was hard to understand and to imagine how you were able to do that again and again, knowing and thinking as you did at times that you weren't sure if you would see your husband again. What was it like when you actually were reunited with him?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for all the support and all your help that you've offered me over these past 2.5 years, and offer me this platform to be able to talk to millions of people around the world, to talk to them about the nature of Vladimir Putin's regime and what it does to people, including Russian citizens who stand up to him and fight against him. And so I'm deeply grateful for that. As for our experience, I don't think that I've been able to process it either. I know that it's a very welcome change, that I don't have this nagging fear in the back of my mind at all times of the day that Vladimir can be killed at any moment of any day. That is a welcome change, but I don't think that I've been able to process that. And, I look at Vladimir without kids, and I think about Maria Ponomarenko, a Russian journalist, sentenced to years in prison for speaking out against the war. Her daughters are growing up without her. I'm thinking about Yevgenia Berkovich, same thing, same story. I'm thinking about the lawyers of Alexei Navalny, whose children are deprived of their fathers. I'm thinking about thousands of people who have been affected in the same way our family has been affected. And I see this is a victory, the saving of 16 people from the grip of Vladimir Putin's regime. This is a victory, but this is only the beginning. We understand that there are over 1,000 political prisoners in Russia, that there are thousands of Ukrainian civilian hostages and war prisoners, not to mention kidnapped Ukrainian kids. And we understand that there are over 1,000 political prisoners in neighboring Belarus. So the fight will have to continue.
And I know, Vladimir, that you will be a part of that. And I want to ask you about the future, such that you even can think about that now. But first, that moment. So when this prisoner exchange starts, you are 35 hours away from Moscow. You say Siberia and Omsk. You're in solitary confinement. Guards burst into your cell. So then what happens?
So they burst into my cell at 3 a.m. And Omsk is the harshest prison regime anywhere in Russia. This is Western Siberia where I was, so that was unthinkable. You know, you have your time for sleep, nothing ever happens at night, but suddenly at 3 a.m., the two doors of my prison cell burst open. There were uniformed officers, there was a prison director, and this was the night from Saturday to Sunday, when no officials are there ever in normal situations. And also a plainclothes convoy, which I'd never seen before. And they said that I had 10 minutes to get up, get dressed, and get ready. And I was absolutely certain at that moment that I was going to be let out and get executed.
Because they don't say get ready for what? It's just get ready.
Just get ready, 10 minutes. And a few days before that, there was a really weird sort of situation where I was taken from my cell into a prison office, and they gave me a piece of paper and a pen and a template and requested that I write a petition for a pardon addressed to Vladimir Putin, in which I would admit my guilt, express remorse for what I've done, and so on and so forth. First, I thought it was just a joke because, you know, when I looked at the text, I just laughed in their faces. But they didn't seem to have a good sense of humor. They just sat there stone-faced and said, "Please write this." I said, "No, I'm never going to write this." They said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, first of all, because I do not consider Vladimir Putin to be a legitimate president. I consider him to be a dictator, a usurper, and a murderer who is personally responsible for the deaths of his political opponents, Boris Nemtsov, like Alexei Navalny, who's personally responsible for the deaths of thousands of civilians, including children in Ukraine, and I'm never going to write anything to him in the first place, and obviously I'm not going to admit any guilt because I'm not guilty of anything. The criminals are those who are waging this war, not those of us who are speaking out against it." And so I had no idea what was happening when they took me out of my cell.
So you didn't sign that?
No, I refused to sign
Yeah.
that. And more than that, they then requested that I write my opinion of Mr. Putin on paper, which I did, and signed that and gave it to them.
So they have that?
They have that. They have that official document. And so 2 days later, this night scene happened. So I thought, okay, then maybe I guess they didn't like what I think of Mr. Putin, so that's what I thought was happening. But instead of the nearby woods, where I thought I was going to be taken, I was suddenly taken to a civilian airport, just a normal passenger airport in Omsk. Omsk is a large city, 1 million plus people. And I have to tell you, I mean, actually, I don't have any words to express how it feels when you spent nearly a year in solitary confinement, just sitting in a tiny cell on your own, day after day, not being able to speak to anyone, not being able to go anywhere, not being able to do anything. And suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a busy passenger airport with normal people, families, kids walking around. I was handcuffed, I was under a convoy, but I was still in the middle of a normal airport. So they put me on a plane, they flew me to Moscow. It's a 3-hour flight. It took me 3 weeks to get from Moscow to Siberia last year because I was on a prison train, the Stolypin prison train.
This was 3 hours.
Yes, this was 3 hours, much quicker. From the airport to the infamous Lefortovo prison, which is the old KGB, now the FSB prison that you read about in Solzhenitsyn's books and Sharansky's books and others. They were all there. So I've now had the experience. In the 2.5 years I've been to prison, I've been to 13 different penitentiary institutions, and Lefortovo was number 13, quite an appropriate number as well. By then, I thought this was going to be some sort of a new criminal case, because that's what they usually take you into Lefortovo for. I mean, there wasn't, frankly, too much practical meaning to giving an extra sentence to someone who already had 25 years, but, you know, with this regime, there's never any limit. So this is what I thought was happening. Held completely incommunicado, nobody knew. My family and my lawyers were being lied to that I was still in Omsk. I was in Moscow sort of clandestinely. And then, still not understanding what was going on the morning of the 1st of August, I was told to give up all my prison clothes and to dress in the only civilian clothing I had, which was just my night T-shirt, my black underpants, because in Omsk, in Siberia, it's minus 40 in the winter, so you have to dress
so
up.
you've got a black T-shirt and underwear.
Basically, yes, basically black underpants, and I also had my rubber flip-flops for the prison shower. That was that was what I had on my feet when I was taken to Germany. And then there was a bus waiting in the prison courtyard, and it was a really, you know, a picture out of, I don't know, some Hollywood movie. There was a row of men in black balaclavas covering their faces. I was told to get on the bus, and it was only then, at the very last moment, when I saw my friends and colleagues on that bus, like Ilya Yashin, Russian opposition politician,
then
Oleg
you knew.
Orlov from Memorial. That was the only minute I know what was happening.
So then, when you leave shortly after your release, you get a phone call, and there's only been a few phone calls that you've had with your family over the past 2+ years. On the other end of this call, though, is your daughter, and I just want to play that moment for both of you.
I'm gonna cry.
Алло, алло.
Алло? Алло, пап?
Да, Катюшечка, это
Да,
ты?
да, пап, привет.
Привет, маленький.
Привет, хорошо тебя слышать.
Вы там где?
We're in the Oval Office.
No, no one is strong enough for this. I was sure I'm going to die in prison. I don't believe what's happening. I still think I'm sleeping in my prison cell in Omsk instead of hearing your voice.
You know, as I said, everything still feels surreal.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you that when we were taken off that plane in Ankara, in Turkey, and we were led into some government building there, and then a lady walks up to me, and as you rightly said, I was forbidden phone calls. I only spoke to Zhenya once in the 2.5 years, and to my kids twice. And so, you know, I hadn't used the phone in a while. And suddenly, we're in Turkey, having no idea what's happening, feeling totally surreal. And a lady walks up to me with a mobile phone, hands it to me and says, "Hello, Mr. Karamurza, I'm from the American Embassy in Ankara. The President of the United States is willing to speak to you." And I thought, okay, by this time, I'm just giving up and trying to understand what's happening here. And this was that phone call that you just had.
Once in 2+ years, and yet here you are.
Last summer was the last
That was
time.
the only phone call.
How do you do this together now?
Baby steps. Baby steps, just a lot of hugging, a lot of smiling and laughing. We decided that we'd stay put until the end of August because Vladimir is already itching to get back to work, and I have a ton of work to do because, as I said, the fight continues. We're gonna have to do everything we can to bring down this regime and end this evil. But yes, we decided that we're gonna take it sort of easy until at least the end of August to spend time with the kids and to just look at each other. Just look at each other and remember every little thing that is so dear to us. You know, Vladimir and I, we've been married for over 20 years. And we've always had this great connection. When I saw him, when he got out of that car in Frankfurt, and the kids and I flew to Frankfurt to meet him there, and he got out of that car, and I saw him, and it was like the conversation, like we just seen each other the day before. So we could pick up and go on, you know. So I think that's how it feels. But I think that is going to be a lot of trauma that we'll need to process. I'm very lucky I have a delayed reaction to any crisis. So yeah, that helps.
Well,